The ultimatum clock started at 15 minutes. The digits burned cold above the forward plot of the flagship Halcyon Gate, as if etched into vacuum. Ultimatum 001459. Commodore Imani Reese stood with boots set, hands behind her back, watching the numbers tick while the hull thrummed with a low, steady vibration from the coil spines spooling charge. They were at Kirell's Pass, a pinch point between dust rings where a narrow trade corridor threaded freight and families toward the inner farms. On the other side, Praetor Reyes' enforcement flotilla sat broadside, broadcasting surrender terms on every frequency like it was a public service announcement. The stakes were printed in the timer itself. If they crossed the line before it hit zero, his doctrine said he would ensure compliance by burning anything that moved. "We teach before we fire," Fleet Mind Status Reese said, and the air tasted faintly of ion as the bridge filters ramped to cold dry. The voice of Sybil, their named network intelligence, answered with a tonal calm that balanced warmth and algebra. 3 convoy hulls clustered behind our shadow. 2 Metacasters report pediatric oxygen debt. Enemy mass signatures, 8 corvettes, 1 command carrier, mine screen unknown. Fuel budgets, we can sprint for 9 minutes at 3G and still return. The deck creaked minutely as compensators trimmed a yaw drift that no one else could see. Reese held the timer in peripheral view, felt its pressure like a thumb on the sternum. "Raz is piping a student playbook," Commander Jian murmured from tactical console glow, painting their cheekbones in alternating gold and slate. "Surrender now, 10 ships spared. Surrender at 0, 5 ships spared. Surrender after 0, none spared. He wants us to teach ourselves helplessness." A hiss of coolant whispered underfoot as a secondary pump cycled to relieve a hot loop. Reese let the words float, then sink. "We're not his students. The mirror lattice does not lie." Before orders, Reese walked the 10 steps to the crew bay hatch where the bridge met the rest of the ship. She needed to hear the ship breathing. In the corridor, the suits hummed on racks and a mechanic's wheeled kit rattled as Chief Ortega jogged by, knuckles scuffed. Somewhere aft, a juvenile laugh snapped into a cough. Life from the convoy had been brought aboard here, those too fragile to run their own scrubbers. She inhaled metal and citrus disinfectant and returned to the plot with a line of decision drawn clean from heel to head. "We show him our mirror," she said. "Not his." Ultimatum recalibration from enemy command. "Sibael," said the voice, lowering like a hand over a lens. "He has advanced the secondary threshold to 12 minutes to account for fleet interference." The numbers changed at once, 0, 0, 12, 0, 0. The bridge tightened, a microsecond of silence so sharp, Reese felt it as a click in her ears. Lieutenant Havel cursed under his breath, then looked up for permission that never came and settled for his station. "Put it on the ledger." Reese flicked open comms to the convoy and to the fleet. "Civilians stay dark and tucked. Keep your heat under our skirt. We'll open a corridor when I say. Until then, no beacons, no chatter." The hull trembled gently as the Halcyon Gate rolled, exposing her belly to the pass, the coil spines blooming like ink strokes against starlight. Sybil raised lattice nodes from the belly bay. "I," the AI said, and hatches parted with a distant thud that Reese felt in her soles as a handful of seed pods drifted free. Tiny and featureless, they were mirror lattice darts, passive facets tuned to catch hostile targeting sweeps and send them back with a fraction's delay, enough to confuse the timing of kill solutions without throwing a punch. Havel Jian said, "Port decoys primed." "3 ghost freighters, 2 false ambulances," he replied. Sweat starting to bead at his temples, despite the chill. The console glare left his pupils pinpricked. "Their thermal signatures are within 6% variance," Reese considered. Make the ambulances sloppy by 12%. If Reyes shoots at those, he does it in front of witnesses. A low growl emanated from the deck as the EW suite warmed. The ship smelled briefly like warmed dust. Hold the line without holding the hostage. She called the crew bay before any switch flipped. The vignette was always the same, and never the same 3 paragraphs to remind her hands what they were for. In the med bay converted from a cargo hold, a nurse with a silver thread stitched through one ear smoothed a child's hair as ventilators clicked. Nearby, a father in a grease-splotched jumpsuit fumbled with the mag clip on a cup, then got it, and looked embarrassed when the nurse smiled. In the far corner, a boy asked if the stars would look different from the inner farms, and his sister said yes, because the dust would glow brighter. And then both looked at the doorway, because they did not understand timers only seats and doors, and whether adults were breathing evenly. Down the hall, an electrician scraped a knuckle bloody, while rerouting a bus to the agricultural decks, cursing softly with each tug. A petty officer handed them a strip of tape and a lollipop in the same motion without comment. 2 Metacasters leaned shoulder to shoulder against a bulkhead, eyes closed, counting through breaths the way they'd been taught on Earth and on a dozen ships since. A volunteer tried to read aloud from a battered children's atlas and got the names wrong. A child corrected him with grave patience, then patted his arm and told him they both did fine. On the loading ramp, a Marine with burn scars around his wrists held a toolbox for a teenager trying to fix a teetering water unit, offering advice only when asked. A second Marine drew a smiley face on their own visor in dry erase marker and held it up to make another child laugh. The child refused to look until their mother did first, because that is how permission travels when the world has come apart. Someone asked if the countdown meant boom, and the Marine said it meant decision, and the child nodded like that made sense because the word sounded less like absence and more like a door. We carry our warning lights into the dark. On the plot, Sybil overlaid vectors like fine wires. Raz holds mindscreen patterns in a lattice across the corridor. Irregular spacing suggests manual oversight. He wants us to surface to tact and prove the doctrine. A coolant whine rose and fell like a breath held and released. He'll aim for the first ship that breaks cover, Gian said, so we must make the first ship a lie. Reese nodded. Ghost Freighter 1 launch. Mirror seeds drift to designated catch nets. EW ring his targeting with false time. Commodore Seibel said predictive models show a 33% chance his mind screen includes patients' minds. They don't trigger on heat or radar, but on indecision, a timer tied to the first time we hesitate within a grid square. Reese blinked. Is that real? It's mean, Havel said so, it's real. The deck shuddered as the ghost freighter slid a puff of vapor, leaving its spine as it cold-burned with minimal signature. Its lights, faint and flickering, wavered like a candle behind thick glass. Tally mercy in public, not revenge in secret. Broadcast his doctrine back, Reese said quietly. Use the emergency channel he thinks we won't dare foul. Put the numbers on open. Sybil complied, voice threaded with steel. Praetor Raz, your policy states compliance is ensured by public harm. We propose a counter-policy assistance ensured by public accounting. We are escorting relief ships. The watch list is open. Reese watched the enemy icons. One corvette drifted marginally, then stabilized. The mine screen glittered like dust against a headlamp, then didn't. Decoys in Gian called. Heat ripples shimmered across the glass of the forward viewport as 3 false hulks flashed alive in the electromagnetic spectrum with the digital breath of invented families. One of the fake ambulances veered sloppy by design, and Raz took the bait as if he had written the bait himself. His corvette lanced with a warning shot, meant to claim space, not flesh, but it hit the decoy's mask anyway, and the mask broadcast what it had been built to broadcast: test, a field med bay layout in bright earnest lines, and a list of names with ages below each bunk. Open a door that closes their threats, now Reese said, and the Halcyon gate unfurled a corridor like a pocket opened within a crowded coat. Mirror seeds caught the Corvette's targeting returns and passed them between facets, so his timing stuttered, measures tripping over themselves by fractions nobody noticed, until bolts missed by 4 meters that should have shaved paint. The hull sang muffled as the coil spines shed their heat into shadow. Push 2 convoy hulls through at 2G, she ordered. Keep one under us. You're going to make him count, Gian said, almost a smile. He hates counting. He likes making others do it, Reese answered. The timer ticked down past 00. Colder somehow for being a smaller number. The Halcyon gate rolled again, showing flank to the pass, so the enemy could think line of sight mattered more than it did. The coolant hiss rose and then steadied. Contact Havel snapped. Patience mind grid confirmed. It woke on our hesitation when we rolled. Learn their pattern and break their protocol. Reese saw it, because she had been taught to look for it, the way the mind's arming signal resonated with their role. A handshake that required the human moment of almost. He thinks mercy will make us slow, she said. Cybele mapped the hesitation thresholds. Feed them to the mirror. Ghost the moment of choice into 3 places at once. Cybele's reply was almost fond. I can make indecision multiply without existing. The seed facets adjusted their delays by microseconds. Somewhere ahead, a mind thought the fleet had paused in 3 grid squares, then none, then a 4th. The first convoy hull is through the soft corridor, Gian reported. Second, 30 seconds out. Their life support signatures are ugly. The deck's vibration shifted as they threw a sliver shore. Thrust, a bass note pressing into the bones of the crew. Praetor Raz is addressing us, Cybele said. Text to voice, volume theatrical, subtext pleased, Raz's command voice filled the bridge like expensive cologne. Compliance or consequence, Commodore? You use tricks while I offer rules. The lattice shows themselves to themselves. Reese opened a narrow channel and spoke as if addressing a class that would remember the question, not the heat. Praetor, your rules change when people do not break. A rule that moves when looked at is not a rule. You placed minds that punish hesitation. We place mirrors that punish certainty. We can do this all day without losing a child. The second convoy ship slid along their corridor sensor paint, a smear of worry. On the forward viewport, dust caught a sunline and threw it back like powdered glass. Heat alert? Ortega called from the bay voice, tinny over internal comm. Coil 3 is flirting with orange and I don't have hands left. Reese stilled the impulse to say she would send hands she didn't have. Cybele trim coil 3 by 2%, borrow that from coil 1's slack. The smell of warmed metal ticked up, then subsided. Havel flinched as an enemy corvette rolled to present spine and slung a jamming net that looked like tarlight. It fell short, tangled in their own patient's mind's early wake like lint on a static line. We reckon costs without burning tomorrow. The cost showed anyway. A junior technician at the lattice console burned their palm on a cable coupling, bit back a cry, and finished the plug before someone tossed them a gel pad with a nod that counted as praise and care at once. A reflector seed clipped by a glancing shot spun into the pass, shedding shards like glitter. Cybele counted the loss and recalculated the echo. Third ship, Reese asked. Holding under us and getting twitchy, Gian said. Their captain has opinions about forward momentum. Reese exhaled. Letter of the corridor meets pulse of the living. Praetor Raz has issued a tertiary proclamation, Cybele said, tone crisp. He says if we do not surface with transponder and kneel to search in 3 minutes, his doctrine allows deletion of all transponder negative signatures. The timer ticked to 00, 05, then 00, 59. Reese lifted her chin and felt the soft buzz of the command collar at her throat. Not a chain, but a pressure sensor for health and suit seal, a reminder of trust, not ownership. He wants us to make ourselves legible so he can punish the visible, she said. Jian, get me the numbers for a corridor that turns into a hall. Anchor the fleet, unanchor their certainty. The plan changed when Sybil found a second pattern hiding under the doctrine like mold under paint. Commodore the AI said, "There's a harmonized echo inside his timer broadcast. It's slaved to a debt register." Reese frowned. "He's charging for the ultimatum. He's paying for it." Sybil corrected, and the deck felt suddenly colder. His command carrier is taking micro-debits each time the countdown pings to an enforcement escrow. The more dramatic the enforcement, the larger the ante. Someone taught him that spectacle must be underwritten. Mystery seeded, Jian said softly. What does that buy us? Reese felt the thread tug. If someone is paying, someone is auditing. Her mouth tasted like aluminum for a heartbeat. Sybil echo his debt signal with the mirror seeds. Don't change the numbers, just return them with a fractional phase shift, so his escrow sees 3 pings where there were 1. We force his purse to blink. The hull's heartbeat deepened as the EW suite took a new breath. Civilians under us are complaining of nausea, Ortega reported. Our roll rate is making the floors feel like stubborn waves. Reese imagined a child trying to chase a dropped lollipop and the sugar tapping across the deck, and she steadied her voice like a level held to a bulkhead. 2 minutes, she said. We will hold for 2 minutes, and then we will not hold at all. We will teach this audit in front of everyone. Raz broke first. Your tricks will end with flame, he intoned, and suddenly the mind screen brightened with arming signatures, not tied to hesitation, but to presence. He's switching to contact nets, Havel said. He's bored of patience. He's expensive. Jian added, watching the ledgers. Sybil projected briefly to the corner of the plot, abstracted so even anyone standing behind Reese could see the story. The numbers flickered, then reeled. Somewhere behind Raz, a quartermaster with a tight mouth was sweating. 2 can play, Reese said. Open corridor becomes open court. She gave the next vignette to herself as a steadying act. In a storage alcove, a petty officer drew a new tally on the whiteboard they kept by the coffee urn, listing meals handed out and blankets distributed with casual pride. Next to it, someone had written names of those who had fallen asleep for the first time in days, and the numbers mattered to nobody outside the ship and to everyone inside it. A child cried because their ears hurt, and a Marine showed them how to yawn into a fist and make the world pop easier. A medic burned a fingertip on a sterilizer and laughed, then wiped tears with the back of their wrist, because laughter and pain share a highway when you're tired. 2 minutes, Sybil said, voice a bell in a quiet hall. Debt echo is stable, escrow is nervous. The timer read 00306. Open the books and leave the doors ajar. Transmit a public ledger of our actions, Reese said. Fuel spent on the convoy. Medicine aboard. Lost mirror seeds, burned palms, names of Marines who drew smiley faces to make children laugh. Keep it dry. Keep it unafraid. Havel snorted. You want to bore him? I want to shame whoever signs his purse, Reese replied. The second set piece arrived like a curtain snap. Reyes' command carrier blossomed a corridor of its own lights, strobing in a pattern, meant to look humane, and opened a search cone. He's going to claim he made safe passage, Jian said. He'll film it and erase us. He takes credit. We take cost, Reese murmured. Not today. She felt the faintest tremor through the deck plates and knew Coil 3 was flirting again. Ortega. I'm here, Ortega said, breathless. And I've got a kid's drawing taped over the panel because it makes the panel feel like it won't bite me. Count what matters, then make them count it too. Sybil bind our mirror seeds in a partial arc to his search cone. When he reaches for credit, he touches his own debt twice. Jian steer our last convoy hull into our shadow, and then through his pretend kindness like a needle threading an eye. The hull hummed with a low harmonic as thrusters pulsed. Dust drifted like fog made of diamonds. Commodore Sybil warned, "There's a structural asymmetry in the mine lattice at Vector 7. It's not random. It's an invitation." Reese closed her eyes for one beat, opening them to the taste of cold metal air. "A kill box made to look like a corridor," she said. Escalation 1 confirmed. "Be ready." The timer clicked to 0:01:40. "Raz again," Sybil said. "He says he will forgive debts incurred by anyone who kneels within his light." Jian spat out a laugh with no humor. "He's moved from law to indulgence." Reese let the line hover and fall. "We don't kneel," she said. "We balance." The mirror does not bow to the hand that holds it. The ghost ambulance drifted through Ray's search cone and lit up every camera he owned with a shining lie that still contained a truth that people inside containers want to be seen. He committed to the picture and moved a Corvette to escort what he thought was compassion. The mirror seeds caught his cone's heartbeat and returned it with a half-beat echo that made his escrow stutter double. Somewhere the quartermaster swore so softly, a clerk pretended not to hear. "Third hull through," Jian reported. The deck's vibration modulated as thrust eased. "We're clear of the immediate net." On the viewport, the dust ring's inner rim glowed pale as bone under the distant sun. "Coil 3, Reese asked, and Ortega laughed again. "Coil 3 knows we love it." The smell of ozone relaxed, replaced briefly by coffee, then by the sterile sweetness of med gel when someone passed on their way to the med bay. Commodore Sybil said quiet, "Now we have an opening to turn the larger board, but not here. At Kirell's Pass, we could keep teaching and leave. In the next system, if we plan, we can flip the doctrine itself. He will follow. He has to pay for that timer with a victory." Reese watched the dwindling numbers strike 0:59 and sit because the clock had become a prop he could not advance without exposing his patron's appetite. "We will set the hook where the hunger lives. Plot me a line to Orion Gate," Reese said softly. "There's a drift yard there with reflectors big enough to polish a cruiser. If we can sync the yard's panels with our lattice, we can build an open corridor that becomes an inside-out hall. We'll invite him to claim a mercy in front of 100 cams and then show him the bill." Jian nodded, eyes bright in the console sheen. A kill box turned inside out. The corridor becomes court. Havel swallowed. Costs, Reese didn't blink. "We pay in heat time and wounds we can dress. He pays in policy. Our fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars," Sybil said suddenly, as if recalling a poem they had written together years ago. Reese smiled like you do when a friend remembers your first truth. "Then write it," she said with light. "Hold steady now, open wide later." They left Kirell's Pass with 3 convoy hulls tucked into the wake of the Halcyon Gate, and a 4th running on a booster plume like a candle protected by a hand. Raz could have thrown one more bolt to mark his doctrine, but the quartermaster had his hand on the purse, and the purse had become an audience. The mind screen dimmed, then went out. The timer remained at 0 like a clock in a museum, important only because someone once believed in it. "Damage?" Reese asked. "Mirror seed losses at 27%, Jian replied. "Coil 3 plastic cage slightly warped. We can file it when cold. 1 console burn, 1 ego bruise from a captain who wanted to run hot, and a child disappointed that the Marine wiped the smile off the visor, because regs say visor marks must be clear in readiness condition." Reese let a breath unspool. The hull's hum settled into a softer purr as they coasted toward Orion Gate on a fuel budget trimmed to the line. Civilian broadcast coming in, Cybele said. A child says thank you and asks if the stars will keep the same names when we get to the inner farms. Reese touched the console with a finger the way one touches a shoulder in passing, so you don't startle the person you care about. Yes, she said, though the child could not hear her. Names stay. Record the names, open the way. In the quiet that followed, someone on the bridge poured coffee, and the smell threaded through the filters, familiar and soft. Havel checked his board and began to hum under his breath, the tune off-key but steady. Ji-an studied the Orion Gate yard map and drew virtual arrows with a fingertip, plotting the dance they would need the panels to learn. Sybil projected a rehearsal reflectors like pewter dishes, lattice seeds like fireflies, a corridor that looked like a mouth until you saw it was a throat for lies. Praetor Raz is following at distance, Sybil said. He has to show an outcome. Reese nodded. We will give him one. Call ahead to the drift yard. Tell them we need the panels for a public service demonstration. If they ask who pays, say the ledger is open and the purse can sign on camera. Ji-an grinned, a sharp, bright thing. We're putting policy on stage. We're putting hunger on stage, Reese corrected gently. Policy will follow. Turn the lights so the shadows speak. They threaded the empty between pass and gate with the steadiness of a hand under a cup of hot tea. The hull vibrated lightly when they crossed the shallow wall of a dust eddy, then quieted. The coolant hissed a soft lullaby. At the edge of the yard, a flotilla of laminar panels hung in slow rotation, their surfaces dull with age, but true. We'll have to polish 3 to get the reflectance we want, Ji-an said. We can do 2 in time. The third, we borrow shine from the first 2 and make the third a ghost, Reese said. Let him see what he wants to see. Let the purse see all of it. Sybil lit the yard with diagrams that looked like choreographies. We must anchor the fleet at 3 nodes while carrying thrust, to dip our signatures through the panels at precise beats, the AI said. We'll need humans on the yard to align manual locks. My calculus says minimal risk to personnel if the wind stays slow. Reese nodded. Send Marines with sticky boots and gentle hands. No rifles on the cameras. We are building a school, not a gallows. Brace the hearts. Steady the hands. Marines crossed on tethers, their suit heartbeats, a quiet thump in their own ears, and a faint, almost felt rhythm through the ship for those who had learned to listen. One paused to point at the view, and in their visor cam a child's drawing appeared taped inside the glass, a ship with a smile and stick people waving from circles that were windows. In the yard's hush, a soft rattle of a loose cleat made a sound like rain on an old roof. Raz has opened a channel to the yard, Sybil said. He's offering payment for the panels if they deliver them to his corridor in 60 minutes. Ji-an rolled their shoulders. He's trying to buy the stage. He thinks money moves light faster than love, Reese said, and didn't apologize for the word. Let him offer. Let them say we already paid. Account for the work. Reckon the light. Sybil made the panels sing. The mirror lattice seeds spread in a petal curve that would make any returning cone bloom into itself. The corridor they shaped looked like generosity until mapped in pulse and timing. Then it was a lesson, not a trap. Reese walked the bridge again, boots a metronome. The air tasted faintly like tin as the EW suite warmed to a new pitch. In the crew bay, Ortega taped a second child's drawing to coil 3, then took it down, then put it back up because it felt wrong to leave a coil without a smile in view. They were almost ready when a new signal licked their sensors like a flash of heat from an open oven. Sybil dropped her voice as if not to startle the moment. Commodore Escalation 2. Raz has deployed a legal frame cast at system scale. He's declaring the yard a temporary extension of compliance space and his cone a court. Ji-an whistled. He's going to sentence us with light. Reese stood very still and then nodded once. Then we speak in the same language, she said. But we tell the truth. The open corridor will become the inside-out hall. Ray's proclamation washed across the yard on every public channel clean font, and the practiced cadence of a teacher, certain that obedience was a species of love. It ran into the gritty air of the drift yard like rain into dust, darkening patches without soaking through. Reese held the plot steady and felt the faint buzz of the command collar against her skin, an even pulse that kept time with the halcyon gate's hum. The coil spines ticked as they bled heat into shadow, and through the forward viewport, the panels floated like flat moons waiting for hands. We will not let his speech define the room. The vignettes began before the pivot, because pivots need a reason. A yard hand with oil up to the second knuckle thumbed a manual catch, wincing when the cold bit the raw cut he had been ignoring since morning. A Marine on the tether steadied him with a gloved palm on his shoulder, the suit servo whirring in a friendly insect way. Two teenagers who knew the yard as a playground, before it was a stage, argued about which panel had the nice side, then handed up a rag without being asked. A grandmother in a patched seal suit stood by the rail with a bag of rock candy and told anyone who would listen that the last time the yard did something this big, it was for a festival, and nobody went hungry. On the halcyon gate, the coolant hissed softly under the deck as Ortega bled a hot loop that kept trying to wander. Gian worked the angles on the plot, the console glare turning their irises to polished coal. Sybil's voice stayed low, as if they were in the same room with someone sleeping. Panel 1 true by 2 degrees. Panel 2 is shy by a hair. Commodore, I can compensate with seed delay, but human hands will feel truer on camera. Reese nodded and tasted tin again, as the EW board breathed. Let them be seen, she said. Let the work be seen. Open the work so the camera learns what justice feels like. Raz approached slow doctrine dressed up as patience. His corvettes flanked the command carrier like parentheses around a sentence he wanted to read aloud only when applause was sure. He will make a show of magnanimity, Gian said without looking up. Then he will swing the cone to harvest gratitude. Reese checked the time it would take to spin the yard's reflectors into place and calculated the life support margins of the convoy ships now tucked into the inner ring. The hull's vibration deepened as thrusters kissed a vector, then steadied. Transmission to the drift yard, Sybil announced. He offers a lump sum for emergency procurement, signature requested by any 3 adult residents. Havel snorted and blew air through his nose. He's trying to buy consent retail. Reese kept her eyes on the panels. Offer a different price, she said quietly. Broadcast our ledger again. Meals, heat rations, burns, treated names spelled right. No adjectives. The smell of coffee threaded through the filters and then faded under the sharper note of ozone when someone popped a panel on the EW rack. The ledger is a light others can stand in. Escalation 3 came sideways. Commodore Sybil said the legal frame he cast includes a subclause for immediate relief creditor priority. He can seize any container that bears relief markings if he declares non-compliance, and he can do it with 1 officer's affirmation. Gian swore softly. He can steal the ambulances by saying thank you. Reese felt a coldness that wasn't air-handled run across her forearms. Then we cannot let him touch our markings, she said. We make the corridor emptier than pride. She called the crew bay. In a side compartment that smelled of sealant and sweat, a medic with a pink band around their wrist swapped a filter with hands that shook from too much caffeine and not enough food. Then steadied when a child in a blanket asked with an authority only children have whether the stars here wore hats. Sometimes with rings, the medic said, and the child nodded as if this solved budget and doctrine both. A Marine polished the visor of their helmet until a ghost of their own face stared back, then drew the smile again because the regs were for later and the camera was for now. Brace kindness. Make it visible. Do not apologize for it. Panels are ready, Gian said. Cybele, I have the phase math, the AI replied, almost pleased. We can invite his cone to harvest our line, then return it through the yard like a pulse that proves origin. Reese inhaled, feeling the halyard lines of her ribs tighten and release. Raz is opening his court now, Sybil continued. He declares this space administered by Enforcement Annex 12. He signs with a flourish, and the escrow pings go up by an order of magnitude. There is an audience. Reese smiled without showing teeth. Then let us teach. Teach where everyone can see. Raz's cone spread like a curtain being drawn wide by a generous host. The command carrier's forward lights dipped and rose in the pattern every news feed loves to caption, "Safe passage offered." Begin, Reese said, and the halcyon gate's mirror seeds woke into a sequence that could be mistaken for applause if one did not know how to listen to timing. The yard's panels, polished by tired hands until fingerprints squeaked, caught the cone and gave it back inside out. For a heartbeat, the corridor truly looked like mercy. Then the echo threaded by Cybele's fractional phase carried the cone's heartbeat into the escrow twice, 3 times too many. Escrow alarm. Sybil reported, voice tight with a joy that sounded like a violin string drawn fast. An auditor has joined. Identity masked, authority clear. They demand a live breakdown of enforcement spend. Gian's grin flickered in the console glow. He has to show the bill. Reese watched the carrier's lights hesitate and felt the deck hum deepen as Coil 3 flirted and Ortega swore at it like a friend. Hold steady, Reese said, and the hull's vibration steadied as if it had heard her. Hold steady until their own weight tips the scale. Raz tried to push through it. Compliance corridor remains open, his broadcast said, but the velvet edges were gone. He asked for 3 adult signatures, and the yard hands saints of bolts and leverage were busy holding panel 2 against a stubborn crosswind. The camera on a tethered Marine's shoulder caught the way the panel flexed a low groan like an old door deciding to be young again. The Marine's suit heartbeat thumped a steady metronome. In a far bay, the halcyon gate's ventilation clicked as it changed cycle, and someone on the bridge swallowed loud enough to hear. Commodore Sybil said that legal subclause is growing teeth. He's invoked emergency creditor status and is aiming to cut power to the yard to prevent misuse of relief assets. Havel's fingers froze above his board. If he kills, the lights panel alignment goes to ruin. Reese tasted aluminum again, sharp as biting a spoon. We will lend them light, she said. Bleed Coil 1 at low band. Give the yard a sun. Ortega groaned. That steals our margin. Borrow from comfort, Reese answered. We will sweat and they will see. Open our reserves. Close his loopholes. The halcyon gate dimmed the bridge lights to furnace glow. The forward viewport bloomed faintly as the low-band flood filled the yard with a dawn that came from the wrong direction. Yard hands in patched seal suits turned their faces to it like plants. The panel creaks softened into compliance. Raz cut the yard's power, and the only light left was the one Reese had given, and the cameras kept drinking, because the cameras don't care where light comes from as long as it arrives. The mirror lattice did the last of its work. Sybil feathered the seed delays so Reyes' court declaration, his indulgence offer, and his creditor seizure ping all overlapped inside the yard's reflectors, like 3 notes played together until they revealed a 4th, truer tone. The escrow screamed in numbers. Auditor has flagged an anomaly, Cybele said. They are freezing disbursements pending demonstration that harm will decrease debt. He can no longer pay for punishment. He must either stand down or violate his purse. The mirror turns policy back upon its author. Raz tried to demand devotion instead of payment. "Kneel and be counted," he declared, and people in the yard laughed because they were busy holding a panel and their hands were full of work. The command carrier's cone twitched, then widened, then shook like a dog that had found a burr. "He can't keep the phase steady," Gian said. "His court is stuttering." Reese let herself think of the grandmother with the rock candy and the teenager who had argued about the nice side, and she felt absurdly like crying. She did not. Commodore Ortega said, over internal voice strained, "I've got a man down in the bay." A tech slipped on a fresh coolant drip and cracked his shoulder on a strut. "He's breathing and cussing." Reese closed her eyes for one beat. "Mark it," she said. "Name injury time. Add it to the broadcast ledger." The smell of coolant sharpened, caught in the baffles, then faded when a pump cycled clean. "Reckon the costs we choose and show them without drama." Raz made the last move he thought was clever. He declared the yard host to non-compliant minors and claimed custody under ancient language nobody had used except to win arguments at bad dinner parties. The auditor, bless whatever ghost taught them, asked for precedent. Sybil fingers, delicate in numbers, gave them a different document, a compact signed at a relief corridor 5 years ago, where enforcement annexes were forbidden to touch civilians without local assent. "They want assent now," she said. "Signatories can be any 3 adult residents." The grandmother with the rock candy held up a hand with the same firmness with which she had kept toddlers from running, and 2 yard hands raised theirs next to hers, oil and all. A hush fell that was not silence but concentrated listening. In the med bay, a child's ventilator clicked and a nurse cracked open a sealant packet that smelled like citrus. On the bridge, someone's stomach growled and Havel pretended not to notice. The command carrier's lights dimmed, then returned like a man whose smile has learned shame. "This court now belongs to the working hands," Praetor Razri said at last, voice measured breath, even in her own ears. "You set an ultimatum to buy a show. We set a corridor to buy time for breath. Your purse is frozen and your declaration is contradicted by your own signatures. You may leave. If you remain, you will see your doctrine weighed in front of people who know what panels cost." His reply came thin spoiled milk in a crystal cup. "This mockery will not stand." "It already is," Gian whispered. Raz powered his cone to full intensity anyway, a bloom of light that made the yard's edges throw long, clean shadows. The mirror lattice gave it back with an honest map of its source, and the escrow, now fully awake and angry like a clerk denied lunch, slammed his spend to 0. On the forward viewport, the cone collapsed like a muscle unclenching. "He's lost purchase," Sybil said softly. "He can still fire, but he can't pay for calling it law." Countdown reached without burning. This is its own verdict. He fired once. The bolt came late and tired, caught a corner of panel 3 and threw a spray of bright fragments like ice in morning sun. A Marine on the tether took a glancing hit to the leg. Their suit alarm chimed a polite, insistent note, and they grunted as sealant foamed. "Wounded but stable," Ortega reported. Angry about the hole. "Name," Reese said. "Add it." The panel wobbled, then steadied when the grandmother placed her bag of rock candy on the corner, as if sugar could weigh a moon. "Perhaps it can." "Praetor Raz is retreating to the edge of the frame," Sybil said. "His corvettes maintain presence. The audience number is still rising." Reese's jaw ached from clenching. She unclenched. "We are not done," she said. "He will try to claim that this was theater, not policy." Gian's eyes were very bright. "We give him policy, then," they said. "We write it down, open the book, and let every signature find its line." The Halcyon gate broadcast the yard's tally, the convoy's intake, the burns, the names, the coil warp that would require filing, the lollipop that fell and was picked up, and was declared clean enough by a mother, because perfection is not always the point. Cybele appended the compact Raz had forgotten he signed. The auditor added an institutional stamp: enforcement annexes must not tie harm to visibility. Escrow will not fund punishment justified by spectacle. Countdowns count only logistics, not lives. The yard cheered like a stadium because paperwork had for once saved a day. Raz lingered at the edge of relevance. "This is not finished," he said, ritual words like salt tossed over a shoulder after a meal. Reese tasted the air in the bridge, stale now and honest. "Correct," she answered. "We will finish it with you present." She plotted vectors in her head, each one a breath. Coil 3 ticked as it cooled, and Ortega patted the panel with 2 fingertips as if thanking a tired animal. The ship smelled like warm plastic and old coffee and a place that had done a thing right enough to rest for a minute. "Anchor here, then move." They escorted the convoy to the inner farms on a path that ran under the camera gaze of 1,000 small feeds. In each, people watched hands learn a rhythm, thrust a line, breathe. In the med bay, the nurse with the silver thread in one ear taught the child to count inhalations, as in 1 and 2, out 1, out 2, and the child fell asleep somewhere between numbers and woke with a crayon and drew a panel that looked like a square sun. In engineering, a tech with a bruised shoulder worked with the other hand and swore in 3 languages when a bolt rolled away, then laughed when it bumped their boot and stopped as if obeying orders. Gian leaned in, voice low. "You changed today from caution to clarity." Reese considered, and the hull vibrated softly, like the purr of a big machine made gentle. "No," she said. "I learned the shape of the door I was already holding." Sybil, amused without malice, said, "Noted for ledger. Put it next to Coil 3's new favorite drawing," Reese replied, and Havel snorted. "Learn the shape. Teach the rhythm." They did not pursue Raz at once. They waited for the auditor to speak publicly. When it came, it was a short message that made the networks burn with commentary. "The ultimatum doctrine is suspended pending review. Enforcement escrow is frozen where it rests. Any officer declaring a countdown must publish logistics and relief alongside risk with numbers." The yard printed the notice and taped it to a beam with the same solemnity with which they had hung the festival lanterns 10 years ago. The grandmother pressed rock candy into the palms of 3 Marines and told them to chew slow so their mouths would not dry on camera. Only then did Reese call Rez back to the table he had built. "Praetor," she said, "bring your threats to the ledger. Say them in the same place you wanted to stage your lesson." He came because doctrine hates to be seen backing away. His cone, now just a light without a law, flared and dimmed like a heartbeat with arrhythmia. "Your ledger is a trap," he said. "Our ledger is a mirror," Reese replied. "If you dislike the face, change the expressions that made it. The mirror waits. It does not chase." The final encounter was brief and legible. He attempted a last narrow seizure of a relief container under a different clause, the kind invented to save reputations after parties. Sybil met it with numbers so clean they felt like fresh air. He tried to claim the yard as an annex of an annex, and a child pointed at the taped notice and said on a live feed watched by 1 million bored commuters that the paper said no. He lifted a hand as if to hail. His quartermaster tugged his sleeve and shook their head. The cameras caught it. Doctrine bleeds out through small gestures. Commodore Sybil said we can end without pursuit. Reese listened to the ship, the faint clink of cooling metal, the low rush of air through baffles, a cough from someone who had laughed too hard. "We end," she said. "We will state the precedent." Gian nodded, held the mic steady, and Reese spoke in a voice that could be heard over the hum of work. From that day, the Ultimatum Doctrine's enforcement purse could not pay for harm tied to spectacle. Any countdown issued anywhere in range required a published logistics plan and a relief schedule, both audited, both public. Any officer caught buying compliance with fear lost their signature for a decade. It was 2 lines in an institutional ledger no one reads until the day they are grateful it exists. Balance, written, history turns by inches. After the Halcyon Gate laid 2 in the shadow of a panel with a cooling face that looked like pewter under a sun that had decided to be kind. The yard hands drifted back toward home, rails boots clacking on metal that remembered festivals better than sieges. Ortega finally peeled off Coil 3's drawing and stuck it to a locker door so the coil would not be sad when they took it to pieces. In the med bay, the ventilator clicked a softer rhythm, and a nurse shut it off to listen to a child's own breath fill a room like a song too small for an orchestra and too perfect for anything else. Havel stood by the viewport, fingers chapped, and watched dust glitter like ground glass in a river of light. Jian rolled a shoulder that had stiffened from holding still. Sybil said nothing for a long time, then, as if answering a question no one had asked, murmured, "We taught today." Reese nodded and let her hands hang loose at her sides. The command collar buzzed once against her throat, where pulse meets language. "Count what we saved. Forget what we could have burned." Reese looked out at the panels, the yard the convoy patched into the inner farms, like a graft that would take if watered. She thought of Kirell's Pass and Orion Gate, and the way a doctrine had flickered when asked to pay its own price. She thought of Marines with drawn-on smiles of gel on burned palms, of an auditor with backbone, and a clerk with hunger, and a quartermaster who tugged a sleeve. The ship smelled like cooled metal. Somewhere aft, a wrench rang against a deck, and someone yelled sorry, and someone else yelled good throw. She keyed the fleet channel for the last time that day and spoke not as a person who had won something, but as one who had put something down and left it where others could find it. We are the sort who count. We keep the numbers near the names. We spend heat when the cold must be warmed. We let cameras see the work, because hiding virtue feeds those who buy panic. Our ally is an intelligence that speaks like a friend and does math like an ocean. Our law is the promise we make with open books. If you meet a countdown, ask for the plan. If you meet a corridor, look for the bill. Our fleet will keep this standard until the books are boring and the children sleep through alarms. That is not revenge. It is mercy with teeth offered in daylight. The yard panels cooled to pewter as the blockade lights dimmed. We end by opening doors others can keep open.